Welcome to another episode of the Dog Mind Gears podcast. Today we will debate about an important topic and offer you a guide to help all families that owns a dog or other pet.
Yeah, and it's really a fascinating subject today.
It really is. So imagine your dog right now, just asleep on the couch or resting near your feet. What if I told you that they didn't just adapt to live in your house, but that your very own DNA, your immune system, and like your brain chemistry were physically re-engineered over millennia just to coexist with them?
Right, which sounds like science fiction, but it's not.
Exactly. So today we're doing a deep dive into a really remarkable article from Dogzilla magazine. It's titled, How Dogs and Humans Became Friends, The Most Reliable Life. And our mission for this deep dive is to explore the genetic, the archaeological, and the biological history of the human-canine bond.
Because the real story, it goes so much deeper than simply bringing a puppy home from a shelter.
Okay, let's unpack this. For the longest time, the story we've all been told, like in history class, is that early human hunter-gatherers actively went out, captured wolf pups, brought them back to the cave, and tamed them.
Yeah, the classic caveman taming the beast narrative.
Right. It paints this picture of humans as these ancient masterminds, intentionally molding a wild predator into a pet. But the premise of this article suggests that this traditional theory of taming wolves might be, well, entirely backwards.
It really might be. The traditional theory was incredibly human-centric. For decades, the prevailing academic thought relied on this strict two-phase model. Phase one hypothesized that wolves just started scavenging near human camps, basically trading early warnings of approaching danger for leftover food. And then phase two supposedly kicked in, where humans they took deliberate control.
Like we just decided, okay, you're our pets now.
Exactly. The assumption was that our ancestors began actively and selectively breeding these wolves for desirable traits, obedience, trainability.
But wait, 15,000 years ago, we were barely surviving ourselves.
That's exactly the issue. When you look at the harsh realities of survival, 14,000 to 15,000 years ago, that level of intentional animal husbandry, especially with an apex predator, it requires a massive surplus of resources.
Right.
And time, which early humans simply did not possess. So the Dogzilla article highlights this major scientific debate that shifts the focus away from human control and toward this concept called self-domestication.
Self-domestication. Okay, I want to dig into how that actually works because the article cites a 2025 math model study that attempts to prove this. And honestly, I struggle to understand how an equation proves behavior from 15,000 years ago.
Yeah, it sounds a bit abstract.
Right. From what I gather, the study showed that wolves could have naturally turned into dogs in about 8,000 years purely on their own, with no human intervention at all. The idea is that early human camps were basically a 247 diner with free food for opportunistic wolves.
Right.
But how does a mathematical model actually demonstrate that process?
Well, what's fascinating here is that the mathematical model functions as an ecological simulation. The researchers input very specific biological variables.
Like what kind of variables?
So things like a wolf's natural flight distance, that's how close it can get to a human before fear just forces it to run away. They combine that with daily caloric needs and generational reproduction rates. And the model demonstrated that the natural selection pressure was entirely on the wolf's side.
So not us selectively breeding them at all?
No, not at all. Picture a pack of wolves near a human settlement, right? The wolves with a slightly lower flight distance, the bolder, less aggressive ones, they got closer to the refuse piles.
You get the easy leftovers.
Exactly. They consumed more calories without expending all that energy on hunting. And because they were better fed, they were way more likely to survive a harsh winter and, have puppies.
And those puppies inherit that boldness.
Yes. They inherit that slightly bolder genetic disposition. So when you run that simulation over thousands of generations, the math shows a natural, unguided drift. A wild predator turning into a scavenger that relies on human proximity, all in roughly 8,000 years.
Wow. That completely reframes the entire relationship. We didn't choose them, they chose us for the caloric advantage.
We absolutely did.
But if it took 8,000 years for them to domesticate themselves naturally through this, slow math-modeled process of just creeping closer to the fire, at what point did humans actually realize these animals were no longer wild, but partners?
It's a great question.
There had to be a moment where we stopped throwing rocks at them and started relying on them.
Oh, the transition from a tolerated scavenger to an integrated working tool would have been incredibly fluid. Because the wolves initiated this partnership for their own survival, they were highly motivated to read human social cues.
Oh, interesting. Like reading our body language.
Exactly. A wolf that could interpret human body language or eye movement could anticipate when food was going to be discarded, or conversely, when it was in danger of being attacked by the humans.
Right, right.
Over time, early humans realized that when these scavengers barked, maybe a larger predator, like a cave bear, was approaching, they basically became a biological early warning system.
Oh, wow. So it was mutually beneficial pretty quickly.
Yeah, and the evidence shows this successful evolutionary strategy wasn't just an isolated event. There was a major 2016 genetic study that found strong evidence for a dual origin.
Wait, meaning it happened twice?
Yes, dogs actually descended from two completely separate wolf populations, one in Europe and one in Asia.
You're kidding.
Nope. Two separate groups of wolves, thousands of miles apart, figured out this exact same survival strategy independently. And later, as human populations migrated across the continents, these two distinct lineages of early dogs interbred.
So the modern dog resting on your rug is this incredible hybridized blend of opportunistic survivors from across the globe. That's wild.
It really is.
But, as these wolves moved closer to the hearth and became a permanent fixture in our crumbs, they didn't just change their behavior. They had to adapt to what we were eating.
Oh, absolutely. The diet shift was massive.
And this brings us to a biological shift that physically changed both of our species. Because roughly 15,000 years ago, humans went through the agricultural revolution. We started growing wheat, rice, corn. And wolves are strict carnivores, right? I mean, their digestive tracts are designed to process raw meat, not grain.
Right. And that shift to agriculture created an immediate evolutionary bottleneck for these early dogs. When humans transitioned from hunting large game to farming, the scraps we threw into the refuse piles completely changed.
From like bone marrow to bread.
Exactly. From meat to leftover starchy porridges. Now, wolves only possess two copies of a specific gene called AMY2B.
AMY2B, okay.
Yes. This gene is responsible for producing amylase, which is the enzyme that breaks down starch in the digestive system. Two copies of that gene are sufficient for a carnivore that might, occasionally ingest the stomach contents of herbivore prey. But it is entirely inadequate for a diet heavy in human agricultural waste.
So how did they survive?
Well, a 2024 genetic study mapped the ancient genomes of these early dogs and found that as human diets shifted, the dogs rapidly evolved to carry extra copies of the AMY2B gene.
No way.
Yeah, today, many modern dogs have more than 20 copies of it.
20 copies. Here's where it gets really interesting, because the AMY2B gene mutation isn't just a minor biological quirk. If we think about the digestive system as like a complex engine, amylase is the specific chemical key required to unlock the energy stored inside starches.
That's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, so it's like a vital software update. The early dogs that randomly developed an extra copy of this gene were suddenly able to unlock way more calories from a piece of discarded bread than the dogs without it. They survived better, had more puppies, passed down this super starch capability.
Right, survival of the fittest starch eater.
Exactly. But I want to push back on the timeline here. Was the starch gene the actual engine driving domestication forward, or was it just a lucky byproduct for the dogs that were already hanging around our camps?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, the starch gene was the necessary biological bridge that made permanent coexistence possible.
Okay.
It wasn't just a byproduct, it was the mechanism that prevented the relationship from fracturing entirely. If those early dogs hadn't adapted to digest agricultural waste, they would have been forced to return to wild hunting to survive.
Oh, I see. They would have had to leave the camp.
Exactly. They would have physically separated themselves from human settlements. The proximity would have been broken. And furthermore, this physiological adaptation, it wasn't a one-way street.
Wait, we changed too.
We did.
Right.
The Dogazilla article points out that humans living in close, continuous contact with these early dogs experienced a biological shift in their own microbiomes.
Really? Our gut bacteria.
Yes. Human digestive systems developed a more diverse array of gut bacteria, heavily influenced by the environmental microbes the dogs brought into our settlements. And that actually aided humans in processing our own new agricultural diets.
Wow, so we fundamentally altered each other's digestive capabilities just to coexist. We literally remade each other on a molecular level.
We really did.
So every time you share a piece of toast with your dog, you are watching a 15,000-year-old genetic mutation in action. But sharing our living spaces didn't just change our stomachs, right? It changed our microscopic environments, leading to profound physical and health benefits.
Absolutely.
If we look at this through a professional veterinary and medical lens today, we see an enormous range of benefits from dog ownership. They improve our cardiovascular health, they're used in vital therapy work to lower human anxiety, and their advanced olfactory systems can detect everything from illicit drugs to fluctuating blood sugar levels.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. But the foundational health benefit, the one written to our ancient history, is how they interact with our immune system.
Yes, and adopting a modern veterinary and immunological perspective, the co-evolution of our immune systems is perhaps the most crucial element of our shared biological history.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, the human immune system is essentially a highly complex categorization engine. It needs a constant influx of varied microbes to train itself on how to differentiate between a lethal pathogen and a harmless particle, like pollen.
Right, so it needs practice.
Exactly. When a human environment becomes too sterile, this categorization engine lacks training data. It can become hyperactive, turning on the body itself and leading to chronic inflammation, autoimmune disorders, severe allergies.
And dogs help with this.
Immensely. Dogs act as natural biological air filters. They are constantly tracking a diverse, benign biome of dirt, bacteria, and environmental microbes from the outside world directly into our living spaces.
So they are essentially functioning as a wagging, walking probiotic supplement.
Yeah, exactly.
Just constantly bringing us new biological books, so our immune system's librarian knows how to categorize threats. It's wild to think dirt makes us healthier, but how exactly does this translate to a veterinary and medical understanding of our bodies today?
Well, the article highlights a fascinating 2025 research study where scientists examined ancient human bones to prove this.
Bones?
Yes. They compared the skeletal remains of humans who were buried near dog sites with those who were not. And the humans who coexisted with dogs showed significantly fewer markers of long-term systemic inflammation.
No way. You could see that in the bones.
You could. The physical wear and tear of a hyperactive immune system was visibly reduced in the people who lived alongside these animals. And we still see the direct medical impact of this today, specifically with the Yakut people.
Oh, right, the Siberian Yakut people.
Yes, they provide a perfect contemporary model for this ancient evolutionary process. For thousands of years, they have maintained a lifestyle where their hunting dogs sleep inside their enclosed tents with the family to survive the freezing temperatures.
That sounds cozy, honestly.
It is, but it's also medically significant. Medical researchers studying this population found that because of this continuous close-quarters exposure to the diverse microbial load the dogs carry, modern Yakut children have half the allergy rates compared to neighboring populations who do not sleep in close proximity to dogs.
Half the allergy rate just from sleeping near their dogs.
Yep. The veterinary and medical consensus is clear. Domestication wasn't just about acquiring a guard animal or a hunting partner. Humans gained a constant environmental immune inoculation that fundamentally lowered our susceptibility to inflammatory diseases.
That is just amazing. So we know they changed our digestive tracts, and we know they provided the microbial training data to calibrate our immune systems. But, physical survival doesn't explain why a dog will eagerly risk its own life to protect you,
True.
or why we feel such profound grief when we lose them. Biology and digestion alone do not explain love. How did a relationship based on scavenging leftover food transition into genuine emotional devotion?
Well, the mechanism behind that emotional devotion is purely chemical, and it involves a hormone called oxytocin.
The love hormone.
Exactly. In mammalian biology, oxytocin is universally recognized as the primary chemical driver behind the bonding process between a mother and her newborn infant. It creates intense feelings of trust, warmth, and protective attachment.
Okay, so how do dogs fit into that?
Well, a landmark 2024 neurological study demonstrated that dogs have essentially hacked into this ancient mammalian communication network.
Hacked in. Like a computer.
Sort of.
Yeah.
The researchers found that when a human and a dog make sustained eye contact, or when a human physically pets their dog, oxytocin levels spike dramatically in both the human's brain and the dog's brain.
Wow. So what does this all mean? The dog figured out the exact chemical frequency to broadcast on to trigger our deepest caregiving instincts. It is a biological Bluetooth pairing between two completely different species.
That's a perfect analogy.
Right. I mean, you look at your dog, your brain releases a chemical that says, I need to protect this creature. And the dog's brain releases the exact same chemical that says, I am safe and bonded to you. It's an evolutionary masterpiece.
It really is.
But looking back at the archaeological record, I have to ask, Do we have actual proof that our ancient ancestors felt this exact same chemical bond? Looking at those ancient burials with deer bone offerings, do you think our ancestors viewed them as family in the exact same way we do today? Or is treating dogs like children a strictly modern 21st century luxury?
This raises an important question about the nature of human empathy across millennia. And honestly, the archaeological record provides a definitive answer. The evidence of deep emotional reverence for dogs stretches back thousands of years.
Really? How far back?
Well, consider the Saluki. It's widely recognized as one of the oldest known breeds. We have intricate carvings of Seleucus dating back to 5000 to 6000 BCE in Sumer, which is in modern-day Iraq.
Oh, wow, that's ancient.
Very. The emotional connection was so intense that Egyptian pharaohs treasured them not as hunting tools, but as royal companions. They actually mummified them with the same care and religious significance afforded to human nobility.
They mummified their dogs. That is dedication.
Yeah, and we see similar ancient unbroken lineages of companionship in breeds like the Basenji in Africa, the Akita in Japan, and the Greenland dog, which has lived and worked alongside Arctic humans for over 2,000 years.
And it isn't just royalty who love their dogs, right? The article details a highly emotional 2025 discovery in Egypt's Fayum region.
Right, the Fayum excavation.
Yeah, where archaeologists excavated a human who had been carefully buried alongside an entire group of dogs. And we see this phenomenon globally. In the Baikal region of Russia and far across the continent in the Iberian Peninsula, researchers have uncovered Neolithic graves where dogs were laid to rest in very specific intentional burials.
Yeah, these weren't just animals tossed into a refuse pit.
Exactly. They were deliberately accompanied by offerings of deer bones. When a prehistoric society, which is constantly battling starvation, takes the time to bury an animal with a valuable food offering for the afterlife, and that speaks volumes. They were mourning a family member.
They absolutely were. Taking the resources to honor an animal in death proves that the oxytocin-driven family bond existed long before modern civilization. That animal was cherished.
It's beautiful, honestly.
It is. And that ancient architecture of loyalty is still incredibly visible in recent history and in our own living rooms. I mean, the article references the famous story of Hachiko, the Japanese Akita from the 1920s.
That story always makes me tear up.
Right. After his owner suddenly passed away at work, Hachiko returned to the Shibuya train station in Tokyo every single day for over 9 years, waiting for a train his owner would never get off.
9 years.
Yeah. That level of devotion bypasses any basic need for food or shelter. It is the pure manifestation of a profound evolutionary bond.
And we see smaller versions of that every day. The article outlines the behavioral signs that a dog has chosen a favorite person. Like, if your dog follows you from room to room, if they show intense, uncontrollable excitement when you walk through the door.
Or if they seek out physical contact to trigger that oxytocin release.
Exactly. Or show a protective instinct over you. Those aren't just cute personality quirks. That is the modern expression of a 15,000-year-old survival strategy that completely transformed into genuine affection. Which is also why the article puts such a heavy emphasis on training your dog.
Yes. Training is often misunderstood simply as a mechanism for control. But from a behavioral perspective, when you train a dog, you are actively engaging in the exact form of cross-species communication that built our relationship in the first place.
So it's not just about getting them to sit still.
No, not at all. You are reinforcing the psychological bridge between human and canine. Establishing commands and boundaries provides the dog with the social structure they evolved to seek out when they first approached our campfires.
You are tapping into thousands of years of shared history every single time you teach them to sit, every time you feed them a starch-heavy treat, or every time they bring a little bit of mud into the house to calibrate your immune system. You are participating in a biological partnership that literally altered the trajectory of human evolution.
Which leaves us with a really compelling final thought to consider for our deep dive today.
Oh, lay it on us.
Well, if our DNA, our immune systems, and our brain chemistry were fundamentally altered by living and working alongside dogs outdoors and in early agricultural camps over the past 15,000 years, how might human biology continue to evolve in the future as our modern, highly sanitized, indoor lifestyles intertwine with our pets more intimately than ever before?
Oh, man, that is something to think about. Thank you for listening, dear Brigadiers, and if you have any questions, visit the source article on Dogzilla magazine at dogzilla.com. That was all for this episode, and until the next time, bye to all listeners of the Dog Mind Gears podcast.